Visit licensuraexams.com and try our samples completely free of charge.
Hello, and welcome to our Demystifying Disorders series here at Licensure Exams. I'm Dr. Linton Hutchinson, joined by my co-host, Stacy Frost. In today's episode, we'll be talking about how you can differentiate social anxiety disorder from general anxiety disorder and autism spectrum disorder in the DSM-5 TR.
Hi there, everyone, and a shout out to Linda, a therapist in Berlin, Germany, who suggested the topic of today's episode. Vielen Dank, Linda. Ich freue mich, dass heute hierbei uns sind. Which, for you non-German speakers out there, and maybe I butchered it a little bit, but that means thanks so much. I'm glad that you're here with us today. So let's start by reviewing the diagnostic criteria for social anxiety disorder.
Okay.
The hallmark of this disorder is a persistent fear or anxiety about social situations where the client is exposed to possible scrutiny or negative evaluation by others. A few examples include performance situations like giving a speech, like a podcast, or informal social gatherings, including conversations with others or talking to strangers. For talking about a child, their anxiety has to occur in the presence of peers, not just with adults. The client is worried that they will appear anxious. They might be stumbling over their words, sweating, blushing, trembling, that kind of thing, and that they'll be negatively judged by others. For example, being perceived as boring or weird, crazy, stupid. The client might even worry that their anxious behavior will offend other people. And this sort of worry tends to be common in clients who have a cultural background with strong collectivist views.
Right, sort of like Takeo.
Okay, I'll bite, Linton. Who's Takeo?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Takeo is a 25-year-old Japanese-American guy who has intense anxiety about going to meet his Japanese girlfriend's family. Imagine that. He worries that if he appears awkward or stumbles over his words due to anxiety, it will be seen as impolite and offensive to her traditional Japanese parents. Who would have known? Who would have thought that? But he is afraid that they may think he is not respecting them properly. In collective cultures, there's a strong norm about not embarrassing the family or group. So, social anxiety may manifest as a fear of unintentionally breaking social norms and offending others because of one's anxious symptoms. The person recognizes that fear is excessive, but they cannot control it.
Well, that is a perfect example to illustrate how social anxiety can present differently depending on the cultural context.
Right.
The underlying fear of negative evaluation is still there, but the specific worries that the client has are tied to social norms and they vary cross-culturally. Okay, so back to the last few bits of criteria for social anxiety disorder. In children, you might see crying, tantrums, although come to think of it, you might see this behavior in adults too.
Right, especially if you're at Walmart.
Yes, I have seen a fair bit of adult tantruming there.
Yeah,
That's a good point. And clinging to parents as manifestations of the anxiety that the child feels. And the other criteria here is that the social situations almost always induce a fear or anxiety response.
Okay, Stacy. Would that also include situations like going to the dentist, for example?
Oh, good one. Okay.
Yeah, well, just up until a few years ago, I really sort of dreaded going to the dentist, but you can only avoid that so long. So, you know what Beck did to help me out?
Oh, yes, I remember this well. So, as I recall, Beck would say that you'd be going off to the beach for the day.
Where we are right now. Right.
Yep. And then she'd let you get all ready in your swimsuit, get your towel together, your suntan lotion. And then instead of making that, left-hand turn,
right,
you'd go right and drive directly to the dentist office.
It's true.
Well, I always did get a big laugh when I thought of that. And I'm sure Dr. Lane and his staff at Distinctive Dentistry did too.
Okay. Well, she only had to do that for a few decades, but I finally got over my anxiety. It really did.
A little bit of exposure therapy. Yeah. Okay, well, bit of a slow learner, though, aren't we, Linton? All right, but back to your question. Your fear of going to the dentist office would be classified as a specific phobia, not social anxiety disorder. But Linton, I also wonder if you developed a fear of going to the beach as a result of Beck's intervention.
No, I didn't. Like, for example, we're here right now.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll take your word on that one, Linton. You do have, one of your backgrounds up, so I can't really tell where you are. So, so just like depressive symptoms, anxiety can manifest in different ways depending on the client's age. You'll also see avoidant behavior. The client avoids social situations where they feel exposed, or if they have to be in those situations, they endure them with an intense fear or anxiety. And finally, the client's fear or anxiety is way out of proportion to the actual threat posed by the situation.
Wait. There's one more. Duration.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's right. Very,
that?
very important. Yes. Yeah, very important part of the criteria. So the anxiety about social situations and avoidant behavior typically last for at least 6 months or longer.
Okay, remember that. 6 months or longer is important. You may have to have that as a criteria that's on an exam. So, what about really shy people, though? Not to name any names there, Stacey.
Yes. Well, shyness is a pretty common personality trait, Linton. Although I'm pretty sure that you have never been shy a day in your life, Dr. Extrovert. You could initiate a friendly conversation with just about anyone, even the most reserved or standoffish person, I'm sure. Because I've been with you at the Publix checkout when you ask people what their favorite animal is.
Yes, and I've gotten some pretty interesting responses from that question. Ziggy, who works in the meat department, was amoeba of all things, and John actually has a pet octopus. Guess where he works?
Let's see. Oh, no, he doesn't work at the seafood counter.
He works in the seafood counter.
Oh, very interesting. I wonder if the person who works in dairy, what their favorite animal is.
I don't know.
All right, so back to your original question.
Okay.
No, shyness by itself is not pathological.
Right. Okay, I'll just have to take your word.
Well, like all disorders in the DSM-5 TR, when the symptoms, in this case, fear or anxiety, cause problems with relational, occupational, social, or educational functioning, that's when you should start considering a disorder. In this case, a diagnosis of social anxiety disorder. Okay. So to sum it all up, social anxiety disorder involves an intense fear of social situations that leads to avoidance or distress that interferes with normal functioning. And that fear, anxiety, or avoidance persists for 6 months or more.
Okay, remember that, 6 months or more. That's right. Now, I've got a question for you, Stacey. You getting a little anxious there?
Oh, whenever you ask questions. Okay. All right, go on. Tell me more. What's your question?
Okay. What if your client only gets really anxious about performing in public? Maybe they have to give a presentation, let's say like a podcast, for example, or perhaps they're a musician, dancer, or an athlete. But aside from that, they don't have any other issues with social situations. Do they have social anxiety disorder? Who was that singer? Was it Barbara Streisand that had that?
I don't know.
I think she did. Yeah.
Social anxiety disorder? I imagine it's actually more common than we think. I mean, it takes a special skill set, I think, to go up in front of thousands of people, especially singing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you're going to love this, Linton. So in this case, you're going to be looking at a specifier.
Oh, no. Why aren't I surprised? Your favorite, specifiers.
Yes, I love specifiers. Well, it wasn't terribly long ago that I would have said a big no to recording podcasts and webinars. But after working with you these past 10 plus years, I think I'm going on like 13 years now, Linton.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and giving talks at conferences, hosting webinars, and doing these lovely podcasts together, I think I'm pretty well past my own performance anxiety. But when I think about this, I look back and I say, this was your plan all along, wasn't it?
Right. Well, you've got me there, Stacey. We are planning to go to the Florida Mental Health Counseling Association annual meeting next year that you missed this year.
Oh, I guess it must have slipped my mind.
Yeah,
Hmm.
right. Maybe I should have told you that we were going to go to the beach instead.
Well, the beach actually sounds really nice right about now. It's about
It
like
is.
35 degrees outside where I am.
Oh, really? It's 69 right now, so it's really nice.
Got your Hawaiian shirt on. I love it.
I do.
All right. So, how about a case to illustrate social anxiety disorder for our test takers, Linton?
Okay. Let's talk about Daniel. And Daniel describes experiencing intense anxiety when having to interact with others, especially people that he doesn't know too well. He's particularly anxious about giving a presentation at work, going on any job interviews, or speaking up in meetings. Daniel worries that he will say something embarrassing or people will just think he's ridiculous. He mentions that he experienced a panic attack on more than one occasion. His anxiety builds as soon as he knows that one of these social situations is coming up. Guess what happens? He loses sleep the night before to excessive worrying. When in the anxiety-producing situation, his heart races, he starts sweating profusely, and his mind just goes totally blank. Afterward, he is plagued by thoughts about how poorly the interaction went. Due to that anxiety, he's turned down a couple job promotions at work that require more public speaking and leadership kind of a role. He avoids attending any social functions, refuses to date anybody, and has trouble forming close relationships. He reports feeling, of course you can imagine, lonely and dissatisfied with his life.
Okay. I think I've got the key points there. So,
Yeah.
I've got a question for you now, Linton.
Oh no, what?
Feeling a little nervous, a little anxious? Okay, so why is social anxiety disorder a better fit for Daniel than, say, generalized anxiety disorder?
Okay, well, this is the kind of session that you might find on an examination that you have to do. Okay,
Hmm.
so you have to think. There's a few key reasons why Daniel's symptoms fit better with social anxiety disorder rather than generalized anxiety disorders. And what are they? The main trigger for Daniel's anxiety and avoidance is social situations, especially those involving potential negative evaluation or judgments from anybody else. His fear is focused on social context specifically. He does not endorse excessive worry about routine life circumstances like health, finances, or household responsibilities, safety of loved ones, and hypothetical future events. If Daniel mentioned those kind of concerns in a session, that would be more indicative of what? Of generalized anxiety disorder. And Daniel's anxiety spikes in anticipation of specific feared social situations, whereas generalized anxiety is more persistent and unprovoked. It just is there.
Okay. All right, here's another one. So, what about autism spectrum disorder? Both ASD and social anxiety disorder involve challenges and difficulties with social interactions.
I see. Well, Stacy, why don't you tell me about that?
All right, turn the tables back on me. All right. Well, this is important information for you guys to know because there are going to be choices, like this on a licensure exam, right? So you have to
Right.
distinguish between disorders. All right. The critical difference, Linton,
Right.
is that in social anxiety disorder, the social difficulties stem from a fear of negative judgment.
In contrast, the social challenges associated with autism spectrum disorder are due to core deficits in social communication interactions and inflexible restricted behaviors, such as deficits in social emotional reciprocity, abnormalities in eye contact and body language, and overall difficulties in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships.
Oh, that was a mouthful, Linton.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So something else that provides a clue to autism spectrum disorder is the age of onset.
Oh, yeah, that would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the client's symptoms appear later in adolescence, then that's more supporting evidence of an anxiety disorder.
Uh-huh.
The typical age of onset for autism spectrum disorder is during early childhood. And that disorder, autism, is classified as a neurodevelopmental disorder. So the age of onset for those disorders tends to be in the early childhood developmental stage.
So that would be a good differentiating criteria for these two, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. If you knew the age when this kind of stuff started for the client, then you could,
Uh-huh.
it would help more support one disorder versus the other.
Okay. So how about giving us a brief summary of what we've discussed in this episode? Okay.
All right, sure thing. So,
All right.
put simply, clients with social anxiety disorder feel afraid or anxious in social situations where other people might judge them or think badly. And this makes the person want to avoid being around people, or they feel really uncomfortable when they have to be around people in social situations. Now, there's a specifier, performance only, that can be used with social anxiety disorder when the anxiety is limited to public speaking or performing publicly.
Right.
All right. And so a few differentials that we talked about were generalized anxiety disorder, which involves excessive worrying about a variety of topics like health, finances, family safety. And the
Right.
anxiety is much more constant and it's unprovoked, unlike social anxiety disorder, where anxiety spikes around specific social interactions. And then there's autism spectrum disorder, which involves core deficits in social communication, interactions, and restrictive, repetitive behaviors. The social difficulties stem from these core deficits rather than a fear of negative evaluation, as we would see with social anxiety disorder. And
That's good.
finally, the age of onset also provides us with a big clue here. Social anxiety disorder typically appears for the first time in adolescence, while autism spectrum disorder symptoms emerge in early childhood.
Well, that was a great summary. Thanks, Stacy.
Mhm.
And all of you, please join us next time as we continue to review topics together so you can pass your exam with flying colors. Until next time, remember, it's in
It's in
there.
there. Auf Wiedersehen, Linda.